to Autoerotica on Speed.
Welcome to Behind the Headlights, Speed Channel's documentary series that tells the stories of some very special automobiles. Vehicles so unique that they changed history and affected the moods and attitudes of generations. Hello and welcome to a very appropriate venue for this episode of Behind the Headlights, which features Ford's GT40 Mark IV. This is the legendary road circuit at Le Mans in France, site of the famed 24 Hours, where Dan Gurney and A.J. Foyt's car became a racing legend. When a Ford Motor Company bid to buy Enzo Ferrari's company in 1962 failed, Ford president Henry Ford II decided he would conquer the Italian racing king on the world's most prestigious automotive stage, Le Mans. What resulted was the most determined and expensive motor racing campaign ever witnessed, with a no-excuse-to-lose philosophy. In this episode of Behind the Headlights, we'll take a closer look at the Ford GT40 and see how a combination of Yankee ingenuity, British technology, and Henry Ford's determination to win at all costs made the car an international and timeless sensation.
I think the thing that made it a great accomplishment, an American company decided that it was going to go to Europe and win against all the European companies, something that had never been done before. Nobody but Henry Ford could make that decision.
They called it the swinging 60s. The British Revolution had hit. The Beatles and the Rolling Stones were driving teenagers wild. Flower power, hippies, and the summer of love were replacing the beatniks of the previous decade. In 1964, the first military action in Vietnam began that controversial war in Southeast Asia. On the road, thanks to cheap gas and open highways, America's torrid love affair with the automobile showed no sign of chilling.
During the mid-60s in America, you had a lot of focus on kind of achieving things that hadn't been achieved. Breaking barriers, breaking records, and of course you had automobiles that were getting more and more powerful all the time.
Americans were looking for an affordable, fun-to-drive personal car, and Ford had the answer. They introduced the Mustang and belted an out-of-the-park home run. On America's sports car circuits, Carroll Shelby's Ford-powered Cobra was destroying Chevy's Corvette.
The 60s was a really great time. You know, we had launched Mustang at 64.5. We were in the process of developing a wonderful relationship with Carroll Shelby, and we were making just very exciting products at that time.
Henry Ford and his management understood winning races sold cars. Win on Sunday, sell on Monday was the company edict. Ford was engulfed in a campaign called the Total Performance Program.
They wanted to go after this so-called youth market. And what this led to was a advertising campaign known as Total Performance.
Ford's Total Performance Program was working in the United States, but Henry Ford desired victory on a much grander scale. As luck would have it, the most prominent company in racing was up for sale: Ferrari.
Ferrari had been out there for years and years and years, and they had raced. They knew all about what it took to win a reliability challenge like Le Mans and similar races. Ford didn't.
After several months of extensive negotiations and reportedly striking a deal with Ford, Enzo Ferrari pulled out. Henry Ford was furious and wanted to beat Ferrari at his own game. Enzo was the international king of racing, and one of his successful dominions was the most demanding race in the world, the 24 Hours of Le Mans in France.
Ford wanted to go and beat Ferrari in Europe. The place to do that was at Le Mans.
When you're talking about 210 miles an hour down the straight of Le Mans, you're talking about an ordinary French country 2-lane road. When you're going 210, it looks like it's about an inch wide. This kind of speed goes on not just in the daytime, but at night with totally inadequate headlights. And sometimes it's going to be raining.
Racing at Le Mans is like no other race. It really goes beyond anything that both cars and humans were officially meant to do.
There is no higher achievement in motorsports than a win at the 24 Hours of Le Mans. Henry Ford II made it his personal mission to dethrone the reigning king, Enzo Ferrari.
Henry Ford was extremely upset. So upset, in fact, that he called in his main racing program people and pulled them into his office, and he essentially looked them all in the eye and said, "I don't care what it takes. I want you to beat that son of a."
Ford initiated a blank check, all-out assault to build his own sports car.
If you put it in context, similar to the 1960s when President Kennedy said America's going to the moon, in the world of Ford Motor Company, the same sort of thing happened where Henry Ford II said, we're going to win Le Mans.
There's things written to the tune that this was a $100 million campaign. So there was really a vendetta, if I can use that phrase, on Henry Ford's part.
The result of his frustration with Ferrari would become the Ford GT, an exceptional automobile that is one of the best-loved and most charismatic racing cars of all time.
GT40 to drive was a fantastic car, simply because it was sorted out, handled extremely well.
It was very comfortable, very roomy, and you were sensitive to there being a lot of heavy stuff behind you.
In 1967, Ford's racing program attained its apex with the GT40 Mark IV. Its average speed at Le Mans was an incredible 135 miles per hour over the 8.3-mile circuit.
I think no car created the kind of stir that the Mark IV created as a supercar among its peers.
The Ford GT40 won the 24-hour French Classic 4 times in a row, ending Ferrari's 6-year run as champion.
It was the first time, really in history, where an American automobile company assaulted European racing.
It was a huge flag-waving kind of opportunity that was just a great thrill. Winning Le Mans 4 straight years is like winning the Olympics 4 times in a row. It's just a tremendous achievement.
And there'll never be another program like that because there'll never be another Henry Ford.
Behind the Headlights takes you back to the 1960s to explore this astounding war between two automotive icons.
Ford Motor Company was determined to win at Le Mans, and we didn't know how to do it anyway, but put the pedal to the metal.
First came CTS, built at the top-ranked plant for initial quality. And now comes the all-new STS. Lightning strikes twice. Cadillac, breakthrough.
The Netscape Internet service lets me choose if I want to have their unlimited access for just $9.95.
So does NetZero.
And Netscape lets me have Web Accelerator for free with their $9.95 plan. NetZero charges $14.95 for their service with Web Accelerator.
What do you get with NetZero? I'm a Netscape guy.
Right now, Netscape gives you free Web Accelerator to surf up to 5 times faster. NetZero charges $14.95. That's over 50% more. Get Netscape for $9.95, now with free Web Accelerator.
These people are getting answers to the most important questions they'll ever ask. Questions about their health. They're finding those answers in a single place. WebMD. 20 million people come to WebMD every month. They find vital information that used to be scattered in 100 locations, now all in one place. The place America comes for healthcare answers. A place called WebMD.
Eat chicken wings, buy Hooters things. Christmas is near, shop, have a beer. Christmas shopping shouldn't be hard. Give your friends a Hooters gift card. Eat chicken wings, buy Hooters things. Shop where it's cool, right from your stool. Calendars and Hooters golf bags. Lots of stuff with no low price tags. Eat chicken wings, buy Hooters things. Christmas is near, gift cards are here. Good at Hooters everywhere now. Buy your friends some Hooters gear, wow! Hooters gifts are always favored.
War II, Ford Motor Company was in dire straits. Sales had plummeted, and the company needed new leadership and new direction. Only in his 20s, Henry Ford II was chosen to replace his aging uncle Edsel at the helm of one of the largest motor companies in the world. Young Henry proved to be the right man for the job. He quickly revitalized the company and put it back on par with Chrysler and General Motors.
No American companies ever had anybody like Henry Ford that ran them. He was the dictator. Benevolent, by the way.
Despite sales increases, Ford was still known primarily as the old person's car company.
One written account says that in the early 60s, Ford Motor Company's image was analogous to Maytag. It was reliable but not very exciting.
They wanted to capture the youth market and get away from cars that were pointed at old ladies.
And racing, of course, is the best way to do that.
They made a bigger commitment to auto racing than probably any other manufacturer in the world.
What Ford wanted to do, Henry Ford II particularly, was have a representative at the international racing scene. And he wanted to win specifically the 24-hour of Le Mans.
Henry Ford took out his checkbook and looked for a likely acquisition. Ford zeroed in on the most prestigious name in sports car racing, Ferrari. Henry Ford II sent company vice president Don Fry to Italy for negotiations with Enzo Ferrari.
They were very seriously looking at it and spent a great deal of money evaluating it and a great deal of time and effort.
The price was $18 million. $18 million to buy all Ferrari. And here Ford probably spent $2 or $3 million just sending people over to Ferrari to see what was going on. And the whole thing turned into a giant fiasco.
Henry Ford II thought he had a deal, but Enzo Ferrari is nothing if not mercurial. And at the last moment, he pulled out of the deal.
When Don Fry, who had run that for Ford, came back and reported into Henry Ford II, always lovingly referred to as the Deuce, Henry said, "Don't worry about it. We'll kick their ass."
It was important for their corporate prestige that they get out there and they field a car at a race such as Le Mans and win.
The decision to create his own sports car was simple. However, the actual building of a Ferrari beater for the world sports car circuits was not.
All new cars have developmental problems. You just don't build something and out of the box go to a pole position and win race.
The 270 horsepower Acura TL with DVD audio surround sound and available navigation is part of commutes everywhere. Possibly the best part. The Acura TL, a higher form of performance.
Wednesday nights on Speed, the world's greatest auto shows. From New York to Beijing, the newest models and the coolest concepts.
This show has more than just your average passenger car.
Sexy, exotic, cutting edge.
Wait till you see the lineup.
The world's greatest auto shows.
Always a crowd pleaser.
Where sleek styling and rugged power sit side by side. Span the globe with the world's greatest auto shows. Bologna, Paris, and Tokyo. Wednesday, beginning 8 Eastern, 9 Pacific. Only on Speed.
Yeah, I'm trying to add a new car to my policy online.
Extreme cars, monster trucks. JoJo's Racing has the largest selection of nitro-powered remote-controlled cars and accessories, ready to run or build your own. We can even fix them for you good as new. Plus everything NASCAR, from die-cast collectibles to jackets and more. Looking for two-wheeled excitement? Check out JoJo's Bikes and Boards. It's all at JoJo's Racing on Route 35 North in Sayreville, the best hobby shop in New Jersey.
Great holiday gifts right from home.
When Enzo Ferrari refused to sell his company, Ford initiated a relentless charge to racing glory with the development of a powerful American automobile.
And what it led to was a massive, almost military-like campaign to unseat Ferrari's dominance in European sports car racing.
The Ford Motor Company needed help to win on the world stage. The British possessed more experience and expertise at European-style endurance racing, so it was decided that the job could best be done in England.
We paired with Eric Broadley of the Lola Car Company. He had a mid-engine Ford-powered car, coincidentally, that gave us a springboard to work from.
Work began on the car, and by the end of March 1964, in only 7 months, the first prototype was complete.
Bruce McLaren and I had done a lot of the testing on the car, sorting out initial bugs, you know, and it showed great promise.
It was billed as the fastest Ford ever built.
It was in keeping with the times, which was to take a fine chassis, usually British, and put a big honking American motor in it.
The Indy engine's 256 cubic inches put out 350 horsepower at 7,000 RPM. That was considered to be powerful enough to send the GT down the straight at Le Mans at over 200 miles per hour. There was a complex network of ducts to take cool air to the disc brakes and the engine.
The gearbox was the Collati transaxle, which Ferrari had been using, and it was proven to be very successful, by Ferrari at least. The wheels were Barani from Italy, and they proved to be not capable of withstanding the torque that our engine produced.
At the time, the car was simply known as the Ford GT.
Somewhere along the line, somebody decided that rather than simply calling it the Ford GT, they would add that 40 on it, and it wasn't the 40th in the line or anything like that. It was supposed to be based on simply how high the car is off the ground. And when you think about it, a car that's only 40 inches high is pretty low.
Rarely had a car's arrival been so anxiously awaited as the GT40s. The car's first public appearance on the track was scheduled for April 1964 at the Le Mans test days. Scores of reporters witnessed the new Ford racer's anticipated coming-out party. Unfortunately, its debut was discouraging. 2 GT40s rolled out onto the Le Mans track. 2 GT40s crashed. The car had aerodynamic problems that proved to be its undoing. Specifically, the car had an alarming tendency to become airborne. Aerodynamic tests conducted showed the need for a spoiler under the front end of the car to combat the high lift generated by the body shape. Another spoiler was added to the rear.
If I were to have a problem, that's a problem I would want to have, is my cars were so fast that aerodynamics came to be a real issue.
2 months later, on June 20th, 1964, 3 Ford GT40s entered the Le Mans 24-hour race. It looked like a good start. By the second lap, Richie Ginther's Ford GT comfortably exceeded 200 miles an hour and was leading every Ferrari. Phil Hill, America's Formula One champion, established a new lap record, averaging more than 131 miles an hour. Richard Atwood and Joe Schlesser drove the third GT40. However, none of these cars would see the end of the race.
The car was driven by Phil Hill, performed very impressively for about 14 laps, and then dropped out with suspension failure.
They also had a gearbox problem because there weren't gearboxes available in those days to take the kind of torque this big V8 put out.
The first round of Ford's assault on Ferrari at Le Mans had failed. 2 more losses followed that year, the first at Reims in France, where 3 GT40s failed to finish, and again at Nassau in the Bahamas, where both entries dropped out. The Deuce was losing patience. In the fall of 1964, he would make one of the most important moves for the GT40 program, enlisting Carroll Shelby to lead the charge.
Carroll was a can-do, let's-get-it-done kind of guy, and very much like my father. And Carroll had a very outgoing personality. And I think that my father's personality and Carroll's personality meshed reasonably well.
internet service lets me choose if I want to have their unlimited access for just $9.95.
So does Net Zero.
And Netscape lets me have Web Accelerator for free with their $9.95 plan. Net Zero charges $14.95 for their service with Web Accelerator. What do you get with Net Zero?
I'm a Netscape guy.
Right now, Netscape gives you free Web Accelerator to surf up to 5 times faster. Net Zero charges $14.95. That's over 50% more. Get Netscape for $9.95, now with free Web Accelerator.
American company based in Southern California had a 5-year contract with Ford to develop race cars. Carroll Shelby was setting the racing world on fire with his Ford-powered Cobras, upsetting Ferrari's hold on the GT class in 1964 at Le Mans. He had vast European racing experience, including a win at Le Mans in 1959 as a driver for Aston Martin. Shelby's expertise and knowledge were desperately needed at a time when the GT40 program was mired in failure.
I think bringing in Carroll Shelby was in my opinion, a key ingredient to the success of the whole GT40 program.
He had a shop full of talent that was unbelievable. Fellows that had been to Indianapolis time after time, fellows that had been in stock cars, fellows that had been in Formula One.
We had mechanics from New Zealand, Japan, Australia, Italy, France, Germany, England.
He had a fellow by the name of Phil Remington, who is certainly the greatest master automotive racing mechanic, fabricator in the history of American motor racing.
Yeah, I know we had a lot of people, a lot of them were ex-hot rodders and for people from all walks of life. And it was a very cohesive group. Shelby American was a winning company. We had a winning attitude. And if you have the right mind frame, you're not going to get beat.
Shelby's team was under the gun to get the GT40 ready for its first race at Daytona. They had only 2 months to transform the car from one that hadn't finished a race to one capable of crossing the finish line.
When we first got the cars, the first thing they did was take them to Riverside, and Ken Miles and Bob Bonner were out there, and they tested the car. They both hated it completely. So the car was completely ripped apart.
Shelby replaced the original exotic 256 cubic inch Indy engine with his own 289 Cobra power plant. It was more reliable, with more power and more mid-range torque.
It was capable of speeds on the Mulsanne Straight of 190 miles an hour in 1965. I mean, that is remarkable.
The unreliable Colati gearbox was also replaced. Its substitute was a 5-speed ZF box from Germany. Shelby enlisted Aeronutronic, Ford's aerospace company, to diagnose the airflow problems of the car. They found that the complex system of cooling ducts was not working as it should.
So we went up there and molded up a bunch of exterior ducting to put on the tail of the car, trying to get more air to the oil cooler and also the inlet to the carburetor. They literally worked 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on that car, and they changed the engine, they changed the suspension, they changed the cooling, they changed the wheels, they changed the tires, transmission. The only thing that was the same on that car by the time we got to Daytona was the body.
First up for Shelby's new modified GT40 was the Daytona Continental 2,000 kilometer race, a grueling 1,243-mile test of man and machine. The Shelby team was running 2 GT40s, one driven by Ken Miles and Lloyd Ruby, the other by Richie Ginther and Bob Bondurant. In the end, Shelby proved to be the difference, resoundingly beating Ferrari's P2s driven by John Surtees and Pedro Rodriguez.
First race of the year was at Daytona. They won it. Second race was at Sebring. They took a second. Next race, they took a third. But this gearbox problem still persisted.
In Sicily, at the demanding Targa Floria road course, the GT40 would compete with Ferrari's 275 P2 on its own turf. It was a 440-mile race consisting of 10 laps, each 44 miles long, with hundreds of tight corners. There, Ford's straight-line speed advantage meant little through the island's twisty mountain roads. Bob Bondurant and John Whitmore were the drivers. When Whitmore lost a wheel on the main straight, an enthusiastic spectator tried to make a souvenir of the wheel's knockoff spinner. Wasting precious minutes, the GT40 sat on the side of the road before Whitmore eventually recovered the wheel nut from the crowd. By now, the P2 Ferrari of Nino Vaccarella and Lorenzo Bandini had an unbeatable lead. Bob Bondurant's GT40 ended its race in a ditch at the side of the road. Two more devastating losses for the team followed, at Sebring and then again at Le Mans in 1965.
One by one, the Fords lost their gearboxes. Ferrari swept the first 6 or 7 places, and Ford, again, was totally embarrassed corporately.
Shelby and the Ford team would have to go back to the drawing board if they wanted to catch Ferrari.
Clearly, this race in '66, when we went in full force, was very important to my father.
The new Cadillac STS. Assume nothing.
You could drive this car for 20 years, this one for a decade, or this one even longer, and you'd still have guaranteed engine protection. New Peak Global Lifetime is the only antifreeze backed by a lifetime guarantee, and its patented formula works on any make, any model, anytime. So no matter what you drive or how long you drive it, with a complete flush and fill, we guarantee it for life. Peak Global Lifetime Antifreeze. Flush it, fill it, and forget it.
The Netscape Internet service lets me choose if I want to have their unlimited access for just $9.95.
So does Net Zero.
And Netscape lets me have Web Accelerator for free with their $9.95 plan. Net Zero charges $14.95 for their service with Web Accelerator. What do you get with Net Zero?
I'm a Netscape guy.
Right now, Netscape gives you free Web Accelerator to surf up to 5 times faster. Net Zero charges $14.95. That's over 50% more. Get Netscape for $9.95, now with free Web Accelerator.
Barrett Jackson, coming in January, only on Speed.
The wily Texan Carroll Shelby and scores of other dedicated professionals at Ford worked long hours and hard days to make the GT40 program a success. The car had begun to win in both the United States and abroad, but the ultimate goal was a victory in the grueling 24-hour race here at Le Mans in France. As we'll see, in June of 1966, the Ford GT40 not only won the 24 hours, it dominated. After 2 failed runs at Le Mans in 1964 and 65, 1966 became a do-or-die situation for everyone involved with the GT40 program.
He said, you will win next year, you know what I mean? Really gave us the impression that they were serious about it.
Henry brought Leo Beebe, Don Fry, and I into his office and said, well, boys, here's your name tag, and our names were there, and it said Ford wins Le Mans in '66.
Ford came out with an improved model in 1966, the GT40 Mark II. It had the same chassis, but a different engine. A 427 cubic inch behemoth developed for NASCAR with an incredible 460 horsepower.
Now you've got this 427 cubic inch motor in this tiny bullet-like coupe. These things could go over 210 miles an hour on the straight at Le Mans.
The Mark II was beefier in every aspect. It had heavier suspension, a lot more strength in the chassis.
Shelby focused on keeping the engine cool by using some advanced ductwork. And they also had to improve the brakes, because what they found during testing was that the brakes were not able to withstand the extreme speeds that the car could reach and then have to come back down from.
Phil Remington came up with a way to change the rotors in about 1.5 minutes. Therefore, the guys could use the brakes as hard practically as they wanted to, but we could change them.
up to that time, the rotors are on the back side of the drive flange, so we put them out on the front side so that we could change rotors pretty rapidly. Just pull a caliper out and hang it on a hook.
Shelby's team also did something quite revolutionary.
They actually built a dyno at Ford Motor Company where they could run an engine and transmission for a full 24 hours like it was running at Le Mans.
And it was one of the earliest computer-controlled dynos. It had an engine and a gearbox. It had a robotic form of shifting. And with your eyes closed, you could hear this car going down the Mulsanne Straight. You could hear it downshift for the turn. You could hear it accelerate out of that turn. And you follow it for a whole lap, sitting there in Dearborn on the dyno.
Le Mans is the most grueling international automotive competition in the world and has been the Everest of auto racing since 1923. It is 8.3 miles of rural roads, most of which are normally used by the public. Usually only a small percentage of the cars that begin the race will finish it a full 24 hours later. Le Mans 1966. Ford was there in numbers.
Ford actually fielded 6 vehicles. 3 of them were under the Shelby American Racing Team. 2 of them were under the Holman and Moody Racing banner. And 1 of them was Alan Mann Racing.
What Henry Ford II did, he didn't pit the GT40 against the Europeans. He pitted Shelby against Holman Moody. And they wanted to beat each other more than they wanted to win Le Mans.
There was a lot of competition between them, but that was good. That made both of us better.
Henry Ford II had been invited to be honorary president at the 1966 Le Mans race. As president, he would drop the French flag to start the event. Through the night, the Shelby car driven by Ken Miles and Denny Hulme ran beautifully. But the Chris Amon Bruce McLaren car suffered brake problems, and they weren't the only ones. Le Mans can punish cars in many ways. By morning, there were only 5 cars left with a chance at winning. 3 GT40s and 2 Ferrari 330 P3s. Ken Miles had the lead by several laps when the Ferraris both suffered engine failure and dropped out, thus guaranteeing the Ford GT40 a 1-2-3 finish, which sparked an interesting idea.
They tried to stage a Mickey Mouse finish with all the Fords coming across the finish line together.
Ken Miles, driving a Team Shelby GT40, was ordered to slow down and let teammate Bruce McLaren catch up. With Ronnie Bucknam of the Holman and Moody team finishing third, the 1-2-3 photo finish was one for the record books. Miles thought he had won, and so did everyone else. But Ford overlooked an important Le Mans regulation.
There was a rule that none of them knew about in the rule book that said whoever started the race further back at the starting grid had actually traveled a further distance. So Bruce McLaren was actually the winner because he'd started further back on the starting grid than the other 2 cars.
They blew it. The way the race was timed and judged, the wrong car won.
Miles had won Daytona and Sebring in the GT40, and he would have been the only driver ever to win the 3 major races in 1 year, and got robbed.
Despite the controversy, the Ford Motor Company had reached the pinnacle of racing success. Henry Ford was ecstatic.
This win was tremendous. You could hear the cheering in Dearborn as well as in France. Henry Ford II was exuberant, and he kissed the drivers.
At the end of the 1966 race, when we came in 1, 2, and 3, I remember staying around Le Mans for probably an hour or so after the race, basking in the glow of the victory, I would say.
But now Ford faced a bigger challenge, trying to stay on top. In order to keep them there, they would unveil their greatest iteration of the GT40 yet, the Mark IV.
This really was the cherry on top of the dessert for Henry Ford, because indeed his company, through the learning experience of several years, had then internally produced a car that was the absolute dominant car in endurance.
here at TSX. It defies more than just convention.
Dear Speed Channel viewers, to all of you who've written us for Speed Swag, well, good news. Speed Swag is back. More shirts, more lids, more jackets. Plain and simple, more swag. That's right, Speed Swag is back. Available now at speedswag.com.
Come on, guys. Time for bed. 5 more minutes.
How many cards? Give me one.
Looking for a safe, fun way to learn poker? Then go to Pacific Poker at 888.com, the world's #1 online casino and poker school. It's fun, it's fast, it's secure. Learn Texas Hold'em, Omaha, and 7-card stud. Big tournaments, too. At 888.com, the action is hot and the poker school is free, so you can learn with friends or players around the world, but no gunslingers. Pacific Poker at 888.com. Download the games now. It's free.
A warning for arthritis patients taking Vioxx. The Vioxx manufacturer recently withdrew the arthritis medication from the worldwide market because an ongoing clinical trial confirmed Vioxx increases the risk of heart attack and strokes. If you or a loved one took Vioxx and suffered a heart attack, stroke, or death, call 1-800-291-2865. That's 1-800-291-2865.
Following its 1-2-3 sweep at the 1966 Le Mans race, Ford's enthusiasm would be tempered by an unfortunate tragedy only 2 months later.
This was an all-out war, and in every war there are casualties. And although it's hard to believe today, to achieve these great wins at Le Mans, Ford paid a tremendous price.
At a road test at Riverside Raceway in California, a GT40 Mark IV prototype went out of control. Ken Miles, one of the most respected drivers of the era, was driving the car.
We were going down the back straight going into turn 9, and the rear wheels locked up from the skid marks, and we went off the right side of the course, and there was quite a drop down to that infield, and the car just disintegrated and then caught fire.
The purportedly strong honeycomb chassis was broken into sections, throwing Miles from the car and killing him instantly. The racing world, Henry Ford, and especially Carroll Shelby, were stunned. Ford's GT program was temporarily suspended. However, 2 months later, the new Mark IV was unveiled.
The Ford Mark IV, it really wasn't an evolution of the GT40. It was part of the same program, but it was in fact a completely new car.
It was a much cleaner design. It had a better suspension, it had better brakes.
The Mark IV became the pinnacle of the GT40 program. It was a major upgrade over the Mark II.
We had a different body shape on it, and that penetrated the air better, and it went down the straightaway faster, 15 miles an hour faster than the cars in 66.
The Mark IV had bigger wheels and larger brakes, and it retained its powerful 7-liter engine.
It's very torquey, which means you get to run a long way in the gear that you're in before you have to shift again.
If you left the pits in first gear and you gas it finally and rev it up to 6,200, I think it's doing about 90 miles an hour in first.
If you can shift 2 or 3 times less per lap over a course of a 24-hour period, it's just that many times you just aren't wearing out mechanical things in the car.
That engine really wasn't working very hard. The Ferrari engine was much smaller and revving much higher, and it was working real hard. This NASCAR engine was cruising.
Ford incorporated another interesting attribute into the development of the Mark IV, driver comfort.
The Ford GT Mark IV was sort of halfway between a passenger car for the street and a race car. Good vision, it was heavy, and it was very reliable.
What made the car so comfortable is the seating position. You sit a little more upright so you can sense and feel the car better. Yet the seat, the way it was designed, it fit the driver just perfectly.
At first, the Mark IV wasn't so comfortable for Dan Gurney. The 6'4" driver couldn't sit in the Mark IV with his helmet on. So Ford expanded the top of the roof to accommodate Gurney. The modification was called the Gurney Bubble. In 1967, Sebring served as a test bed for the new Mark IV. Ford captured the first 2 places, with Bruce McLaren and Mario Andretti in the winning car, and A.J. Foyt and Lloyd Ruby finishing second. Ford felt confident that the Mark IV was ready for the demanding 1967 Le Mans. The biggest question remained, could Carroll Shelby's unusual pairing of 2 legendary drivers bring home another victory at Le Mans?
Dan always tells a story that he would love to have put a bet with an English bookie on whether they were going to win a race or not, because they were voted the most likely to lose.
This gift has no-go. This gift has go. No-go. Go. Give them gifts that go from your Honda dealer. With great deals like 6.9% fixed APR financing and 0 down payment for 60 months. Or use your Honda card for a fixed APR and flexible payments. Plus, get up to $700 in bonus bucks on select models. Remember, there's no-goes and Honda gifts that go.
I'm gonna wrap myself in paper, I'm gonna dot myself with blue, stick some stamps on the top of my head, I'm gonna mail myself to you. Oh, I'm gonna tie me in a little red string, I'm gonna tie blue ribbons too, climb up into my mailbox and I'm gonna mail myself to you.
This holiday, the entire U.S. Postal Service is working for you.
Sometimes one more is one too many. Know your limit.
Credit card bills, late payments, medical bills. Financial stress can happen to anyone. If you're a homeowner and you need cash, call or log on to Ditech.com and take the Ditech Challenge. We'll guarantee you the lowest rate and fee and help you to consolidate debts and lower your payments, even if your credit is less than perfect. Put us to the test and find out why so many other lenders are saying, lost another loan to Ditech. Log on or call 1-800-80-DITECH.
Even though the GT40 had won the most renowned race in the world for Henry Ford in 1966, there was still an air of discontent emanating from the deuce.
Henry Ford felt that the Le Mans win in '66, as great as it was, still wasn't All-American. So he very consciously set about developing an All-American team that included the drivers A.J. Foyt and Dan Gurney. And the car was the Ford GT Mark IV.
Ford entered both the Mark II and Mark IV model GT40s at Le Mans, and they set the fastest Mulsanne straightaway speeds in qualifying. But the Ferrari P4, driven by Mike Parks and Ludovico Scarfiati, achieved quicker lap times. For the race itself, Shelby American and Holman and Moody each entered 3 cars, 2 Mark IVs and a single Mark II. The prospect of driving Ford's new GT40 Mark IV brought together 2 of the greatest drivers of their era, Dan Gurney and A.J. Foyt. While both were fabulous drivers, their racing backgrounds were entirely different. Gurney's experience was on the World Sportscar circuits and as a Formula One driver. Gurney was a veteran of the Le Mans race, having had several unsuccessful goes. Foyt was an oval track driver and had just won the Indy 500 a month earlier.
A.J. Foyt had no history in endurance racing. He'd proven himself, obviously, at the Indy 500 race, but that was a completely different type of race. You know, it's an oval track, and it's a much shorter distance.
It was expected that Gurney and Foyt would go out and lead the race and kind of set the pace and then break, and somebody else would win the race.
But they were not the pick of the litter, if I could say it that way, of all the cars that were running that year for Ford.
Shelby's conservative strategy at the '67 Le Mans stood in sharp contrast to his driver's usual all-out aggressive style.
Dan Gurney by then had seen me win Le Mans 3 times. I don't know whether he took notice, but you don't do it by going super fast.
No matter how fast your car is, you can't drive it that fast for 24 hours, or it'll break.
I never ran a lap really hard. I always had about a 4-second cushion, I'd say. And I did that purposely.
The race was only the last 3 hours. You saved the car, and then you had the last 3 hours.
I didn't expect us to be leading the race early in the race. I thought this would come after attrition set in and everything else. Well, by the end of the first hour, I think we were in the lead.
Gurney and Foyt's Mark IV took the lead and kept expanding it. 9 hours into the race, Ford held the first 3 places. But still, no sign of a smile from the deuce.
Once again, it's clear the Fords are faster, but are they going to last? The Ferraris keep them in sight, but they can't make any great progress. Then, between 1 and 2 in the morning, the Fords hit a bad patch. Mario Andretti comes out after having his new brakes put on. The new brakes act up. Mario loses control, crashes the car. 2 other Ford team cars are following very closely. They also crash trying to avoid Mario. In a wink of an eye, 3 Fords are gone. You've got now the 1 Ford, Dan Gurney, A.J. Foyt in the lead by 6 laps, but 2 Ferraris are pursuing.
Following the unfortunate accidents, Ford would now pin their 1967 Le Mans hopes on car number 1, Gurney and Foyt's GT40 Mark IV.
It turned out to be absolutely terrific. They didn't have a big personality clash. They worked very well together. They communicated well, and they drove a brilliant race.
This Friday and Saturday only, Zales has the lowest prices of the season. Like this $4.99 half-carat 3-stone diamond pendant, now just $1.99. Hurry, quantities are limited. At Zales, the diamond store. This Friday and Saturday only, Zales has the lowest prices of the season. Like these $299.99 half-carat diamond earrings, now just $1.99. Hurry, quantities are limited. At Zales, the diamond store.
Barrett Jackson, coming in January, only on Speed.
Is your business losing sales?
How many cards? Give me 1.
Looking for a safe, fun way to learn poker? Then go to Pacific Poker at 888.com, the world's #1 online casino and poker school. It's fun, it's fast, it's secure. Learn Texas Hold'em, Omaha, and 7-card stud. Big tournaments, too. At 888.com, the action is hot and the poker school is free, so you can learn with friends or players around the world, but no gunslingers. Pacific Poker at 888.com. Download the games now. It's free.
A warning for arthritis patients taking Vioxx. The Vioxx manufacturer recently withdrew the arthritis medication from the worldwide market because an ongoing clinical trial confirmed Vioxx increases the risk of heart attack and strokes. If you or a loved one took Vioxx and suffered a heart attack, stroke, or death, call 1-800-291-2865. That's 1-800-291-2865.
As the 1967 Le Mans 24 Hours heated up, Dan Gurney and co-driver A.J. Foyt had their GT40 Mark IV poised to claim another title.
He was running first, Ferrari was running second. The Ferrari was being driven by a man named Mike Parks. And it was clear the only way they were going to beat the Fords was if they could force them to brake.
Mike Parks is right up on me, and then he's flicker with a little thing on the lights, you know, and you're kind of in the mirror, and it's bothering me.
And he's flashing his lights, and he's trying to get Gurney to get the competition flowing, get the adrenaline flowing.
It went on for at least 4 laps, but he wouldn't try and pass. He just wanted to harass me.
And Gurney says at one point he actually pulled off the track.
What does Mike Parks do? He pulled off behind me and stopped his car right behind me. And I sat there for at least 10 seconds, maybe a little bit more. And finally, I guess he just decided, this isn't going to work. So he pulled out and went on. And 4 to 5 laps later, caught him and passed him and never saw him again.
By the morning, the Fords were 1st, 5th, and 6th, with 3 Ferrari P4s between them. One of those Ferraris, driven by Günther Klaas and Peter Sutcliffe, dropped out due to a loss of oil pressure. Foyt and Gurney, who'd started the race at a blistering pace, hung on to win.
There's the checkered flag. The veteran Dan Gurney from California. The hard-charging A.J. Foyt from Texas. Together, they've covered 3,267 miles at an average speed of 135 miles an hour. Both new records.
I was across the track and made my way through the mob back down to the pit. And they were certainly happy. I mean, they were jubilant, but they were also very, very tired.
Foyt and Gurney did a sensational job, and I'll never be able to thank them enough for holding off just enough to win a race and never extending the car.
The two most unlikely guys of that whole campaign to come forward were A.J. Foyt and Dan Gurney, and they did it, and they did it going away.
Ford had convincingly demonstrated its initial victory was no fluke. The win in '67 was an all-American effort that established the GT40 as a legend.
Dan Gurney rather spontaneously began a tradition that is mainstay today.
The crowd is ecstatic. The Fords have done it again. Henry the Deuce is there. Dan Gurney gets up on the podium.
They get this huge bottle of champagne, and they're expected to take a swig of the champagne. Well, Gurney, of course, is ecstatic. He's finally won Le Mans, and he's kind of a playful guy anyway. And all of a sudden, he just kind of shakes up the bottle and sprays everybody with it.
So got her going and just started spraying all the cameras, the lenses. Henry Ford II and his new wife and from Italy. And just, we managed to cover all bases practically, and it was a fantastic moment.
Following this monumental victory, Henry Ford decided to rest on the company's laurels and let privateers take up the gauntlet.
I think we pulled out of Le Mans after the '67 race primarily because we had accomplished what we wanted to accomplish.
Even an FIA rules change aimed at curtailing the Mark IV's winning streak couldn't stop the GT40's legacy from charging ahead, as evidenced by the victories of the Gulf team's blue and orange liveried GT40s in '68 and '69.
It was actually the exact same vehicle with the same serial number and everything that won in both '68 and in '69. That may be the only time that's ever happened in the history of the race.
So Ford ended up with 4 consecutive victories when they were really actually satisfied with the first 2.
They put a cap on engine size at 5 liters. That was the largest the engines could be from that point on.
Why did they change the rules from year to year? If it takes place in Europe, they want to fix it so a European car can win.
Decades later, the car would re-emerge as a 21st century model.
Ford has decided that history is important. That going back and doing some retro stuff is good for marketing, and they're right.
The 260 horsepower supercharged Grand Prix Comp G. The new 275 horsepower GXP. And now, the 350 horsepower GTO. See your local Pontiac dealer today.
The Netscape internet service lets me choose if I want to have their unlimited access for just $9.95. So does NetZero. And Netscape lets me have Web Accelerator for free with their $9.95 plan. NetZero charges $14.95 for their service with Web Accelerator. What do you get with NetZero?
I'm a Netscape guy.
Right now, Netscape gives you free Web Accelerator to surf up to 5 times faster. NetZero charges $14.95. That's over 50% more. Get Netscape for $9.95, now with free Web Accelerator.
On DVD.
All I want to do is race.
There ain't the guy with the fastest car, just the one who refuses to lose. ESPN presents 3. With over 5 hours of Dale Earnhardt interviews and races.
Go, boy, go!
Own the 2-disc collector's edition today.
Wednesday nights on Speed. The world's greatest auto shows. From New York to Beijing. The newest models and the coolest concepts.
This show has more than just your average passenger car.
Sexy, exotic, cutting edge.
Wait till you see the lineup.
The world's greatest auto shows.
Always a crowd pleaser.
Where sleek styling and rugged power sit side by side. Span the globe with the world's greatest auto shows. Bologna, Paris, and Tokyo. Wednesday, beginning 8 Eastern, 9 Pacific. Only on Speed.
To commemorate the GT40's remarkable achievement and to celebrate their centennial in 2003, Ford Motor Company announced a new road-going reincarnation of the sports racing car that captured America's heart and won the 24 Hours of Le Mans 4 consecutive years.
It's a really nice melding of absolutely up-to-date technology and a body design that is 35 years old, but is so good that it looks good today.
Despite the 2005 model, the original remains a valuable classic. Prices can reach well over $1 million, and one particular Le Mans winning car is priceless. The celebrated 1967 Le Mans winning GT40 Mark IV now resides at the Ford Museum in Dearborn, Michigan.
As a race car, no car from any manufacturer, let alone Ford, has accomplished what the Ford GT did.
It was an American win for Ford Motor Company.
And there was this great feeling of pride. By God, you know, we can do that. Take that, Enzo. America can win these things too.
As proof of just how difficult Le Mans can be, of the 44 GT40s that raced the 24 hours, just 9 went the full distance. But of those 9 finishes, 4 were victories, along with 1 second place, 2 thirds, 1 fourth, and 1 sixth place. One of the most remarkable achievements in the annals of motor racing.
I think the legacy is the only American wins at Le Mans were by the Fords. These are the great Fords of all time.
Because there was no foreseeable end to its winning, the GT40 was outlawed by further rules changes in 1969. The Ford GT40 will always be a reminder that, when put to the test, an American car company beat the best competition and emerged a winner in the world's toughest race, not once, but 4 times in a row. The Ford Motor Company, Carroll Shelby, tireless mechanics, and brave racers gave American automobile enthusiasts a legacy that will never be forgotten.
For all of us that were involved with this, it was one of the greatest times of our lives.
It was really thrilling to be in on it.
I want my legacy to be, I want to make sure those people are recognized. They were the pioneers.
The truth of the matter is I enjoyed every day. I really looked forward to going to work in the morning because I knew I was going to learn something new. It was absolutely that good.
It was one terrific time, and one that could never repeat again. And after we won a race, I said, I don't care what happens now. We've got it. We've put our mark up on the tree, and there it is.
One of the most remarkable aspects of the GT40 program is the fact that it ever saw the light of day at all. With unlimited funds but very limited time, it's almost inconceivable that a specialty program was able to create the quintessential racing car. It was because of Henri the Deuce's obsession with beating Ferrari here at Le Mans that he opened his checkbook in a way few company presidents have ever done. From the beginning, Henri decreed that the car would be built and that it would win at Le Mans, which it did in such resounding fashion that it became one of the most dominant race cars of all time, an unmistakable icon of the day when Ford took on the world's best here at the world's greatest sports car race and won convincingly. I'm Bob Varsha for Behind the Headlights. Join us again in the future for more stories of some extraordinary automobiles.